Well, here we are, Dan. It's June 22nd, 2018 in San Antonio, Texas. You're Daniel Wayne Hurley, born in Chanutfield, Illinois. And now here you are, a member of the TCDL Hall of Fame. How's that feel?
Well, that was the greatest honor I've ever had in my life yesterday. Just to ride on the shoulders of all the prior inductees and to know all of those people, the Scrappy Holmes, Jerry Goldsteins, Tim Evans, Jerry Morris, David Botsford, all that group. It's just incredible honor, incredible.
You've had quite a bit of significant people in your life, many of whom were lawyers. The first of whom I think would have to be your dad, Dan Louis Hurley. I know, let's see, where'd you go to high school?
Coronado High School in Lubbock.
And after that?
Texas Tech undergrad for accounting.
And then did you stay right there for law school?
Went to law school at Tech. I was actually working in Seattle, Washington, and about to start St. Mary's Law School. And I learned the day before Texas Tech started that they had one opening come up. And the dean said if I could get there by Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I could take that spot. So I drove, I think, about 26 hours straight to get to Lubbock.
When you started law school, you know, with your dad being a practicing lawyer, what was your plan going in?
I originally thought that because of Dad's coaching, being a lawyer, that I wanted to be a tax lawyer. And so I think they changed the tax code about 3 times during my law school career, and we had to learn all the changes each time that occurred. And by my 3rd year, I went and said, Dad, I'm not cut out for this. I'm not going to be a tax lawyer. So he said, well, you need to get some trial experience then, and need to go interview with Alton Griffin to go to work in the DA's office. And luckily, I was able to get a job there and started working in the DA's office.
When was that you started for Mr. Griffin in the Lubbock County DA's office?
It would have been 1978, May of 1978.
How many years did you stay?
I stayed 20 months, exactly.
But in that 20 months, didn't you guys try about 60 cases?
I tried about 60.
Wasn't there one time you went through a period, how many misdemeanors a week?
There was, back in the old days, you learned about the case during trial or during jury selection. There wasn't a whole lot of preparation going on, and we would try DWI in one day as opposed to the 3 or 4 that it takes now. And so I tried 4 misdemeanors in a week, 2 different times. We got about 60 trials over along the 20 months I was there.
You made some lifelong friends in the DA's office who you practice with now. Who were some of those gentlemen who were colleagues of yours in the DA's office who you're still friends with today?
Well, of course, Everett Seymour, David Nelson, Judge Jim Bob Darnell, all of those people, Judge Clint Avery, were all in the DA's office when we started back at that time in '79 with John Monfort.
I'd like to ask you about, not just as a lawyer, but growing up, who were the people you looked up to and really admired and respected as a child and as a young man?
That was a long time ago, and my dad had a law firm, Shaver, Hurley, and Souter. Judge Shaver was a partner in Madison Souter.
Bill Shaver?
Yes. That was a partnership, and every time I would go down there to visit, they always made you feel so good. They were so friendly, and all the people that they had contact with at the office were also very friendly, very congenial people you like to be around. And I sensed that my father and his law partners had great respect from all of the community. And I wanted to do something to try to measure up to my father and to gain that respect that I perceived from the rest of the community. So that's how I got in.
Some things that kind of drive your mentality, though, while your dad's a lawyer, you know, he came out of the Depression. They were sharecroppers. He served in the Navy. He and Madison had been friends a really long time. And those life experiences of being treated like a second-class citizen in America, of being overlooked and left out. While your dad wasn't a complainer by any stretch, did those things get passed on to you and your brothers?
Yes.
Do you think that's part of why it is natural for you to question authority?
Well, there's no doubt that that Dad did not appreciate others who conducted themselves as if they were superior to my father, who looked down on him. And so he taught us, whatever you do, don't treat people that way. Did you notice how Mr. So-and-so acted towards Mr. So-and-so? Don't ever do that. You need to be better than that. And one of the things that we grew up in the Hurley household, learning every night before we went to bed, was the importance of the golden rule. And that's something that my dad didn't have to recite it. He did it. He walked the walk, and he was a great example for us.
He didn't tolerate a bully well either, and that seemed to have transferred over pretty well. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Dad did not like to be bullied. I know that when he was in boot camp in the Navy in 1943 or 44, that some young sergeant maybe got a bit abusive and abusive to another soldier, and apparently Dad took all he could take and ended up getting a 30-day sentence in the brig for reacting to the sergeant's conduct. And so Dad would suffer consequences on occasion for resisting abuse.
I want to fast forward a little bit to early in your career, both in the DA's office and then later when you went into private practice. It seems to me y'all had a lot more fun practicing law than we do now.
You know, that was something that I really enjoyed. Law school was not fun for me. It was very, very serious and difficult. But when we got into the DA's office, everybody there was ready to work hard, but we also played hard. We had a lot of fun. There were a lot of practical jokers and a lot of practical jokes that were done nearly every day.
Well, when you passed out cigars, when your first son, Cody, was born, and Jim Bob said, hey, yeah, go, you know, dads weren't always at the hospital for everything then. What happened when you came back to your office?
My buddies had decided, and it was Tom Cannon who was the first assistant under Alton Griffin. Alton Griffin did not suffer tardiness nor being absent. And so I came back to my office that was next to the break room, and all of my buddies were over drinking coffee in the break room watching. And as I opened my office, I was a little apprehensive because I'd been gone for 24 whole hours. And as I opened the door, there was nothing in my office but a telephone sitting in the middle of the room. All my furniture was gone, all my plaques were gone.
Do you think you'd been fired?
Yes, that's what I thought. I'd been fired.
Young father, I've been fired.
Yeah.
Where was your stuff?
Apparently they had hidden it in the nearest restroom. And it was old metal military desks, and it took a long time to ever get all those paper clips out of the drawers to make the drawers work properly.
When you left the DA's office, where'd you go?
I started to work for Dad and Madison Souter and worked for them from 1980 to 2000 when you and I started the partnership. And so I worked for them for 20 years.
In the truest sense, when you started out, would it be fair to say you were a general law practitioner, workers' comp, a PI case, a divorce, a DWI? You were just a general practice attorney. Is that fair?
Yeah, probably 75% of the lawyers in Lubbock at that time had a general practice, did a little bit of everything.
When did you gravitate to doing more criminal defense or become involved or get invited to get involved with TCDLA? How'd that happen?
Well, Clifford Brown decided he would start a local association, the Lubbock Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, about the same time that he became president of TCDLA. And Bill Wishkemper was on the board and Chuck Lanehart was on the board. And Bill, I had come to know Tim Evans through my college roommate Tim was his older brother's best friend. And so I got to know them and was very impressed with Tim. And Tim and Bill encouraged me to become active in the Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. And I can remember asking Tim a question, well, don't you know that there's a lot of money to be made in personal injury and workers' comp? I remember Tim telling me, you know, I don't want to learn that stuff. All I want to do is criminal law, and that's all that I can possibly do. And I was impressed because he was one hell of a criminal lawyer, and he encouraged me to get involved in it. It seemed like with his encouragement and involvement in TCDLA, it wasn't hard to make that transition from a general practice to doing nothing but criminal law.
Through relationships and things you've learned in TCDLA, how has it changed your representation of people?
Well, I have to say the way I try a case now, or from the last 15 years to the way I did it in my first 5 years of representing the citizen accused, is entirely different. And it's because of the things that I've learned at TCDLA seminars and the tutoring and the mentoring of great criminal lawyers.
As that transitioned into technique and cases, let me ask you about some cases that are memorable to you. Some are very high profile and have a lot of news, and some are cases that between you and the client and who was in the courtroom that day, nobody else will care. But you remember it. Pick a few. Let's talk about some of those.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of success in the courtroom. Some of it may have been from prosecutors not properly evaluating their cases, overcharging their cases, or being just bullies, being abusive. And so we were able to convince a number of juries that they needed to right that wrong, which they did. You know, jurors are always hungry for fairness, and if you can open the door for them, show them the way, they'll do it. But we had, in 1989, it was probably my first high-profile big case, was John David Weathered in Conroe. And it was a capital murder case where they were seeking the death penalty. And we tried the case from September of first time we tried it, from September to December 12th, it took us to try that case. And we were fortunate enough to get a life verdict, and we got the case reversed on appeal, had another chance. So we tried it again in '92, and the jury found our client again guilty of capital murder. And unfortunately, John died of a brain aneurysm while he was in prison. But the big thing about that case was it got a lot of publicity. The 48 hours, all the yellow journalism, TV shows picked it up, got a lot of publicity, and the case getting reversed on the issue of expert testimony on misidentification was big at the time, and unfortunately Judge Keller decided that on the second appeal that we hadn't properly preserved that error, so she affirmed. I think there were 6 appellate decisions in that case, but that was my first case that got things going.
But that was kind of cutting edge at the time. Elizabeth Loftus from Stanford and the studies about witness misidentification, and the brain is not a video camera, false memory, and false identification. Now it's fairly well accepted, and I think our friend David Botsford has made that pretty well clearly established law that you can put on expert testimony about witness misidentification. And then there you were, 1990, 92, fighting that fight for David Weathered. Somebody else fixed it later, but it didn't help John David.
It didn't help him at the time. It did help establish the law and the need. And like we were talking about this week, Martin Underwood's case, the Freeze case, that said even if you were paid counsel, that if you couldn't afford expert assistance, the court would have to pay it for you, was how we made the record, and it just started the block of cases that led up to the reversal of that inability to use an expert.
You had a case with an old friend of yours from law school who'd been the county attorney over in, I think, Oatsworth County or somewhere, and the feds charged him with a marijuana case, Saul Thomas, and they're not used to losing out there in the Pecos Division. What was that wild and woolly fight all about?
Well, Saul Thomas was the county attorney of Hudspeth County for many years, and he had a ranchito on the river, and so he would drive from Sierra Blanca, his home, down to his ranch. He, in theory, to feed the cows, but sometimes I think he was going down there to drink a little tequila. And one day on his way back, it was nighttime, he was tired, hot, and maybe a little inebriated, and he came head on to some bright lights. He jumps out of the vehicle, shots are fired, he grabs his pistol, fires shots back, and lo and behold, there's 2 cars. The drug car that had the headlights in his eyes, and then the Border Patrol who was chasing the drug car. The Border Patrol agent testified that the bullets were whizzing by his ears as he was ducking, as Saul was shooting. So he was charged with assault of a federal agent and conspiracy to distribute 500 pounds of marijuana. And we were fortunate enough to get a not guilty in that case. Jim Blankenship was the prosecutor, and I think it was the first not guilty that had in Pecos in 5 years.
Well, early on you had a case for a fella, was it Danny McCutcheon?
Danny McCutcheon was a young man that still calls me, and that had to be in the early 80s, maybe 83, 84. Danny McCutcheon was accused of shooting and killing a man through a closed door, 6 bullet holes in a pattern in his chest, and he was accused of murder, and we were able to successfully show the jury that that man that got shot deserved to be killed because Danny thought he was going for his gun, and the jury found him not guilty. And so Danny McCutcheon today is a long haul truck driver. He called me the other day from Minnesota and said, Mr. Hurley, I have a legal question I'd like to ask you. And I said, well, Danny, you're a long way from Lubbock. Why don't you ask somebody in Minnesota? He says, I don't trust anybody but you.
Let me ask you about two pretty big cases in the last 20 years. How did the capital murder case of Joseph Carpenter come to your office?
His sweet mama came to our office crying about her son being accused of a terrible rape, sodomy, brutal beating of his next door neighbor. That they'd taken him for a polygraph exam. They told him he had failed a polygraph exam, and he confessed to two different police officers that yes, he killed the lady. And so this is another case of Martin Underwood's defreeze rule. While we were retained in the capital case, we were able to get Richard Offsheet, one of the nation's leading experts into false confessions. He charged the county $40,000, and I think I was paid a total of $5 as attorney's fees. And the judge was very unhappy about paying that expert fee. But the jury found Joseph not guilty because they believed that the confession was totally, completely false.
Was there an aspect of DNA in that case?
There was. They recovered evidence of seminal fluid in the body of the deceased, and it didn't match Joseph Carpenter. The expert or the DA believed that it was really inconclusive. The expert was able to testify that it matched or could have matched two other people at the house that night if they could find them to take a sample. But they had run back across the border and never to be seen again. And the jury did the right thing in that case.
I want to ask you about two more cases, but then I want to talk to you just about experiences within TCDLA, specifically the Memphis trip. But let me go back to those cases. Dick Robinson and Lou Jones. Let's talk about Lou Jones first.
Lou was the first capital case that came to a conclusion under the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act from President Clinton in 95-96. And Lou was a decorated war hero who was a black man, came back, retired at Goodfellow Air Force Base, and married a young white lady who decided to leave him. He was having great difficulty over the breakup of that marriage, and saw a young lady who looked almost identical to his wife, kidnapped her, abducted her, terrible rape, and just a terrible factual situation. And then Lou took her out under a bridge and beat her to death with a tire iron. Confessed to it, led the law authorities to the body, and so we tried that case in Lubbock. It was extremely difficult. Punishment evidence was some of the strongest mitigating evidence I'd ever seen or heard in my life. Lou was abused as a 4 or 5-year-old repeatedly by his uncle.
Was there some evidence he'd been exposed to sarin gas and Desert Storm 1 as well?
Yeah, there's no question that there was an indication that he had objective brain damage caused by sarin gas. And Kay Bailey Hutchison, Senator Hutchison, supported his attempts to determine that medically, but Attorney General Alberto Gonzales advised the President George Bush that they shouldn't run down that rabbit trail, and denied any additional time, and Lou Jones was executed.
Let's go to a high school friend of yours, Richard Robinson?
Dick Robinson was a guy that I'd known many years, and one day he calls me up and says, "Danny, I think I've really messed up this time." He had messed up a few times before, not like this day. He tells me that the SWAT team is surrounding his house, that he and his wife had an argument. He had thrown the clothing and the couch out to the front yard and tried to set them on fire. The SWAT team was there. He also told me that the tank was also outside his front door. So I began talking with a hostage negotiator immediately. And as I was talking to that negotiator, I could hear gunfire erupt over the telephone. The phone went dead. I later learned that my client has been shot in the back when 337 rounds of M5 and 308s had gone off, police shooting through the house. The reason the shots were fired is because a sniper was goosed by another officer and accidentally shot and killed Kevin Cox, a police officer. And so the police knew that they had the killer, Dick Robinson. The ME was a good friend of mine, a very honest man, and when I talked to him about it, he said, "I don't believe that your client is responsible. I think this is likely to have come from one of the police officer's rifles." And that turned out to be true. And we were able to get Dick Robinson released to his family on a Friday night about 9 or 10 o'clock while he was waiting to try to make bond, which of course would have never happened.
Did that turn into a civil case against the city?
It did. We were able to, Dickie Grigg and I were able to sue the city, and Dick ended up getting a settlement of about $890,000, and Dickie got a little money, and I got a new house.
I want to ask you about the Memphis trip. Was that a president's trip or a lover's trip, and what was so significant to you, especially in light of 1964 in the summer when your dad took you and your brothers to Washington, D.C.? How did those things connect for you in Memphis?
Yeah, 1964, my father took me and my two brothers to New York for the World's Fair. And on our way, we stopped in and sat in the Senate gallery as they were voting on the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. And I can remember the emotion that my father had and how important it must have been. Then, of course, I was 15 years old when Martin Luther King was assassinated at the Lorraine Hotel. So Rick Hagan has his president's trip to Memphis. Anita High School, Mike High School's wife, went to a church that the Reverend Billy Kyles was the preacher. Reverend Kyles was one of the people standing on the balcony with Martin Luther King when he was killed. The Civil Rights Museum is at the Lorraine Hotel, and it is, if you ever have a chance to go to Memphis to the Civil Rights Museum, do it. We did it. We had a personal tour with Billy Kyles, and he told us about that day and his experiences being there when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And it was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. Of course, it was through TCDLA.
We do a lot of work in TCDLA, a tremendous amount of work for others, for our clients, for ourselves. But along the way, have you met some really fine people?
Well, you know, as yesterday at the Hall of Fame, you hear Martin Underwood talk and about all the cases he's had, about Frank Jackson and all the cases that he's had. And I look down the list of all of the people that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. And, you know, people like Jerry Goldstein, who give up their own home for 3 days to Rusty Duncan.
What was your, I think there's a, for the purposes of this interview, it's worth telling, I don't think in a Hall of Fame interview they've ever discussed the range wars. And your first significant involvement with Jerry Goldstein, his work ethic, the way they could combine civil lawyers, criminal lawyers, and a big team of people to do heroic work. What had happened in Lubbock, Texas that led to the range war? What was the process and what was the result?
Yeah, that was probably one of the most significant things that I got to do. I got to carry Jerry Goldstein's briefcase during a federal 2-week injunction hearing in Amarillo during a driving snowstorm where Millard Farmer had been accused of tampering with witnesses, and 2 police officers, Bill Hubbard and Pat Kelly, had been indicted for falsifying evidence because they were critical of the medical examiner, Ralph Erdman, who ended up going to prison for falsification of autopsies. And Jerry took over that case, led a team of lawyers, Mark Lane from Skadden Arps in New York, and Jeb Stone from Chicago, just an incredible team of lawyers who proved to the judge that there was substantial evidence that the indictments and the charges against the 3 individuals was because of retaliation for their pointing out what a terrible wrong Ralph Erdman had committed and the due process violations to the people they were defending in a capital murder case.
Talk about just how gracious Jerry Goldstein was. Who initially was going to be your client?
Bill Hubbard was my client.
He was a local Lubbock police officer.
Yep, local detective, and you know, that was about 92 or 3, and I knew that was going to be my case to make it to the big time, because I knew he was innocent, and I knew we were going to be able to prove that we had a corrupt judicial system and definitely a corrupt medical examiner. And so Bill Wishkemper calls me up and says, "Danny, I know you really got a big case now, and I know how bad you want to carry that all the way through, but I've got to tell you that we've got a young lawyer or not a young lawyer, a lawyer from San Antonio by the name of Jerry Goldstein. He's coming in, he's going to take that over." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure about that, Bill." He said, "No, he's going to come in and take it over. Let's go have a lunch with Jerry and we'll find out." And after talking to Jerry and hearing about the plan and what they were going to do, I was honored to be able to carry his briefcase into the courtroom and watch Captain Goldstein marshal this evidence in this case to one of the most significant outcomes ever in the state of Texas.
What has been most rewarding to you about your involvement with TCDLA these last 30 years?
Well, you know, all I've ever wanted to do is I wanted to help people. I wanted to be involved in some sort of competitive effort to do that. Don't mind getting in a fight every once in a while. And so being a criminal defense lawyer was the way to do all of that. And you know, just the people that I've had a chance to work with, the people that we've had a chance to save, the lives, the thank you cards that I have in my office, photographs of the clients that I've represented. All of that means so much to me. And getting the rewards, the accolades, and the recognition, not to mention, it's been a good financial decision to move the way that you and I have moved. And of course, I can't thank you enough, David, for being my partner and helping me and making things good for my family and my children.
You're a joy to practice law with. I think your dad and Madison's rule was work hard and stay out of each other's way. We practiced together almost 19 years and haven't had an argument over money or anything that mattered ever. You're a joy to be around. Thank you.
Well, the thanks goes to you, and I appreciate it like you don't know.
Well, there's nothing like TCDLA, and it's made up of members one at a time, just like you. Thank you for letting me interview.
Absolutely.